At Camp Pendleton, the fog still clung tightly when a soft murmur sliced through the early dawn. Inside a shattered crate lay a drenched German shepherd puppy, trembling with stubborn resolve, somehow still trying to make itself heard. No one expected it to survive the night. Yet within days, this small life would become a voice that transformed silent barracks into a resonant choir. It wouldn't start by learning commands. It would master hearts. It would defy duty's call, blend seamlessly with the gunfire's rhythm, and carry a widow's sorrow as if it were a solemn hymn. What unfolds next will move you to tears and restore your faith in second chances for those forgotten. But before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And if you stand by the belief that no soul, animal, or human should be left behind, hit subscribe and share this story, because sometimes miracles come on four paws with a brave little voice. The dense morning fog wrapped Camp Pendleton, California, cascading from the hills like a silent ocean. The air held a chill, heavy with the briny scent of salt and oil. Familiar echoes of a Marine Corps base rousing to life filled the space. Trucks rumbled distantly, and boots clattered sharply against gravel, reverberating through the mist. Yet beneath the disciplined dawn's cadence, a softer, shattered sound wove through the morning air. A faint whimper, barely there, drifted from the deserted training range near the northern boundary. The patrol froze. Private Morris, a fresh-faced recruit with anxious eyes, knelt beside a wooden equipment crate abandoned near the old supply depot. Pressing his ear close, he whispered, "Sir, there's something alive inside." Sergeant Ethan Ward stepped forward, a 55-year-old Marine, rugged and athletic, his uniform marked by the fading green of countless drills, and his boots worn yet carefully laced. His short salt and pepper hair framed a weathered face, a small scar beneath his left temple, telling stories of battles fought silently. His once fierce hazel eyes now held the quiet weight of memories haunting his every breath. Ethan had just returned to active duty 3 weeks prior after a long recovery from a training injury, an accident that had cruelly taken his loyal canine partner Valor. Words had been few since. He lowered himself beside the crate. The wooden lid was damp and cracked, smelling faintly of rust and sea air. Another muffled cry came, paired with frantic, faint scratching. "Step back," Ethan said softly. He eased the latch open, and the moment it creaked wide, a tiny German shepherd puppy sprang to life. Its fur was soaked, painted in sable and tan hues, its little chest heaving as it yelped defiantly. Its eyes bright, amber, and piercing, locked onto Ethan's with a silent demand. Why had it been trapped away from the world? The creature let loose a string of sounds, half whine, half growl, ending in a sharp bark that bordered on a complaint. Private Morris laughed. "Looks like he's got strong opinions, Sergeant." Ethan's face held steady, but a subtle smile cracked through, betraying a flicker of warmth. He lifted the shivering puppy, carefully wrapping it in his field jacket. "Easy now," he whispered. The dog nestled its face into his chest, releasing a low, rolling hum, as if trying to speak its own language. The other Marines watched quietly, captivated. Moments later, Captain Nathan Cole arrived, drawn by the stir. Cole, a 39-year-old officer with calm, sharp features and steady hazel eyes, radiated composed authority. His short brown hair lay neatly beneath his cap. His uniform was flawless, as if discipline itself had honed every crease. Revered among his men for his unwavering fairness, he seldom raised his voice, but when he did, it silenced even the fiercest storm. His gaze fell upon the tiny creature twitching in Ethan's arms. "A recruit caught your eye, Sergeant?" he asked with a dry edge. Ethan snapped to attention, a reflex born of habit. "Found him in a crate near the old range, sir," Ethan answered. "Alone, freezing, and noisy." Captain Cole bent over, examining the fragile animal. "Hold on to him for a few days. Get Dr. Sarah Kim to check him out, then send him to the K-9 training unit in Nevada." His tone was sharp, decisive, unyielding. Soon after, Sarah Kim arrived, tall, lean in her late 30s, her oval face framed by tightly pulled back black hair. Her movements were brisk, professional, but her dark eyes held a kindness forged from years of healing wounded souls. She wore her lab coat layered over fatigues, the faint scent of antiseptic trailing behind her, like a silent signature. Raised on a Wyoming ranch, she grew up absorbing her father's lesson. Every animal speaks, if only you learn to listen true. That conviction born from losing her family's dog in a wildfire shaped her into a healer, both efficient and deeply compassionate. She quickly examined the pup, wiping away the dirt clinging to his fur. Male, roughly 7 weeks old, healthy weight, no visible injuries yet. She paused, attuned to the strange sequence of sounds the pup emitted. He's unusually vocal, she noted. Ethan nodded. You noticed too. The pup gave a soft growl, sliding into a chirp, then a sharp yip, as if the noises carried a message only they could understand. Sarah smiled faintly. He's speaking to you, Sergeant. Maybe he remembers who saved him. Ethan stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the puppy's face. The alert ears, the trembling whiskers, the steadfast gaze refusing to look away. Those eyes held defiance, yet beneath it, a softer truth. Trust. He gently stroked the dog's head and whispered, You've got a lot to say, don't you? The pup answered with another cascade of sounds, short barks, low rumbles, ending in something almost like a sigh. Ethan chuckled softly, the sound catching him by surprise. It was the first laugh to escape his lips in months. I think I'll call you Echo, he said gently, because everything you say bounces right back to me. Captain Cole smirked, just slightly. Fitting name. Just keep him away from the armory. By late afternoon, the fog had finally lifted, unveiling sun-scorched ridges stretching beyond the base. The men returned to their routines, while Ethan carried Echo to a small supply shed, serving as a temporary kennel. Inside, the pup explored eagerly, sniffing the metal shelves, chewing on a bootlace, then sat proudly, like he was staking his claim to the place. Ethan watched from a bench, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. You act like you've been stationed here forever, he muttered. Just then, Sarah appeared, holding a towel and a small can of dog food. He'll need warmth and rest. Probably got separated from his litter during the last supply transfer. Ethan's brow furrowed. Someone might have just left him there. She shrugged, her voice calm, yet heavy with meaning. People panic. Bases shift fast. Sometimes kindness slips right through the cracks of paperwork. She crouched beside the pup, running her hand along his back. He's a fighter. Most pups that young wouldn't have made it through the night. Echo wagged his tiny tail, then lifted his head to meet her gaze, letting out a sound that was half bark, half growl. Raw and full of spirit, a quiet proclamation of a will that refused to be broken. Brief and purposeful. Sarah laughed, sharp and bold as ever. Just like you, Ethan said, almost smiling again. That evening, beneath a sky stained with deep shades of orange and purple, Ethan slipped back into his modest barracks room overlooking the motor pool. He settled at his desk as the steady drone of engines outside blended with the soft ticking of the wall clock. On the floor, Echo lay curled inside a folded blanket, eyes open, restless. Every now and then he murmured softly, whimpering sometimes a faint growl, as if exchanging quiet words with the stillness around them. Ethan tried to focus on an old training manual, but his gaze kept drifting downward. The cadence of Echo's quiet sounds was strangely soothing, reminders of courage, like the steady breaths of his old partner beside him on long night patrols, calm and unwavering. He closed the book and leaned back, letting memories settle like dust in the air. The pup lifted his head, eyes glowing in the low light, and let out a soft hum, part question, part comfort. Ethan chuckled gently. You don't sleep much, huh? He whispered. Echo cocked his head, barking shortly, a sound that felt like an answer, then curled back into rest. For the first time in ages, the night didn't feel empty. The barracks, usually cloaked in silence and routine, now breathed softly with tiny noises, pause shifting faint exhales, the pulse of something new. Outside, thick fog rolled back over the camp like a protective shroud. The men settled into bunks, engines quieted, and even the ocean breeze seemed to still. Only a single sound pierced the calm, a small, persistent whimper from the corner of Ethan's room, followed by a sigh, then an unexpected gentle rumble, the purr of a dog's contentment. Ethan smiled into the dark. "Sleep tight, Echo," he breathed. "You've already made this place feel a bit less desolate." The pup exhaled, rolled over, and let out one last soft bark as if bidding good night. "Sergeant." And in that moment, after so many years, Ethan Ward closed his eyes and slept without dreams of war haunting him. Dawn arrived, wrapped in the soft gray light of the coastline. The fog had lifted somewhat, but still clung stubbornly to the asphalt roads threading through the barracks, a memory refusing to vanish. The air carried faint whispers of salt and gun oil. Camp Pendleton slowly stirred awake. Boots thudded across, gravel engines rumbled, and distant marching drills began their steady rhythm. Inside the small supply shed, now serving as Echo's temporary refuge, the morning unfolded differently. Sergeant Ethan Ward, with his sleeves neatly rolled, moved slower than usual. His legs ached in the chill, a lingering ache from the accident that had sidelined him for months. He'd overslept by 15 minutes, not much in civilian life, but enough to rattle a Marine's nerves. As he entered the shed, Echo was already alert, sitting tall beside the food bowl. The young German Shepherd pup, barely 2 months old, had dried fur, now sable, with streaks of silver and a dark saddle tracing his back. His paws were large, signaling the strength he was destined to carry. Ethan barely caught his breath before Echo erupted into his morning symphony. Sharp barks, quick growls, rising and falling in tone, a sudden yip capped with a grunt that spoke of stern disapproval. Ethan froze mid-step. "You're scolding me," he murmured. Ethan halted in his tracks. "You're really scolding me," he whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. Echo responded with a series of chirps, each note carrying a distinct rhythm. "Complaint, impatience, accusation," a voice called out from behind him. "Sounds like someone's got strong opinions about being on time." It was Tom Rodriguez, a man in his early 40s with broad shoulders and a weathered visage worn by decades under the desert sun. His dark hair, now streaked with silver, was cut close to his scalp. He wore grease-stained coveralls, his hands forever marked by the scent of machine oil and coffee. Tom was the backbone of maintenance, keeping the base's generators humming and the vehicles alive. Gruff by nature, he rarely said more than necessary, a trait that earned him quiet respect. Yet that morning, he leaned on the doorway of the shed, arms crossed, a small smile playing on his lips. "He started 5 minutes ago," Tom remarked. "Hasn't stopped once. Guess he's got some lungs." Ethan shook his head, masking a grin. "Private Talker here acts like he runs the whole place." Echo barked twice, sharp and insistent, as if confirming the claim. Tom chuckled. "Well, Sergeant, it looks like your spot's been taken." Moments later, Dr. Sarah Kim arrived carrying her worn leather satchel. The edges of her white lab coat were smudged from her morning rounds. She moved with quiet grace, efficient and calm, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She possessed a presence that made folks lower their voices the moment she entered a room. "You're late, Sergeant Ward," she said, glancing at her watch. "Tell him that," Ethan replied, nodding toward Echo. The pup growled softly as if siding with Sarah. She raised an eyebrow, crouched down, and began her exam. With practiced ease, she let her fingers glide over the dog's ears, neck, and spine. Heart rate normal, coat clean, hydration perfect. She paused when Echo released a low hum somewhere between a purr and a sigh. "Still talkative." "Huh?" Tom leaned in closer. "He does that all day. Talk, talk, talk. Maybe he's giving us orders." Sarah smiled quietly, a rare sparkle in her expression. "He's healthy," she said firmly. "No neurological signs, no trauma, just very communicative." "Communicative," Tom echoed with laughter. "That's a fancy word for noisy." Sarah straightened, adjusting her ponytail. "You'd be surprised, Rodriguez. Animals that vocalize often do so because they've been around people too much or they're feeling lonely." Ethan folded his arms thoughtfully. So he talks because he craves attention. Or connection, Sarah countered, locking eyes with him briefly. Not so different from us? Her voice softened the atmosphere between them. Echo tilted his head, studying her face, then yipped once clearly in agreement. Sarah looked down at him and smiled genuinely this time. See, he understands every word. Tom snorted. Sure he does. Next thing you know, he'll be filing reports. The morning marched on with drills outside the steady commands of officers cutting through the air. Left, right, left. Echo watched from his kennel tail, flicking with each shout. Every command drew a response from him. A chirp, a short bark, a low growl, as if adding his own commentary to the human chorus. By midday, word had spread. Passing Marine stopped to listen, chuckling at the talkative pup. Someone dubbed him Private Talker, and the name stuck within hours. A young corporal even claimed Echo could mimic the sharp bursts of the drill sergeant's whistle. Though not perfect, it was close enough to make heads turn. Ethan observed it all from the sidelines, his expression carefully unreadable. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not from something so small and full of life like this. Yet there was something grounding in it. The laughter, the gathering crowd, a gentle reminder that even here, beneath the steel and order of the base, joy still found its place. At lunch, Tom came back carrying a sandwich in one hand and a half-empty cup of coffee in the other. You know, Sergeant, I think he's winning over the entire platoon. Ethan shrugged. He's loud, but harmless enough. Tom smirked. Loud and harmless, that's about half the Marines I know. As the afternoon sun poured gold over the compound, Echo began to settle. Ethan opened the kennel door and sat down beside him. Without hesitation, the pup climbed into his lap, curling up and releasing a contented sigh. The warmth of that small body against his uniform stirred something deeply familiar, almost nostalgic. Ethan's eyes drifted toward the open shed door, where the horizon shimmered in golden light over the vast Pacific. Sarah passed by clipboard in hand and paused. He's choosing you, you know. Ethan glanced down at the sleeping pup. He doesn't really have a choice. Orders are orders. Maybe not for him, she whispered before walking away. Later that night, Ethan sat at his modest desk. A journal he'd begun after returning from recovery lay open beside the lamp. His handwriting was tight and precise, a discipline learned through years of training. That night he wrote only one line. He's not afraid of the gunfire. He's afraid of the silence after. Echo shifted in the corner, letting out a soft grunt before settling back to sleep. Outside the base grew quiet, with lights dimming one by one. The fading echoes of the day gave way to the gentle breath of the sea. Inside, for the second night in a row, Ethan listened, not to his own restless thoughts, but to the steady heartbeat of a creature determined to break the silence in a world demanding stillness. The morning sun tore through the lingering mist like a blade of gold slicing across the training field. The usual fog that cloaked Camp Pendleton had lifted early, leaving the parade ground sparkling with fresh dew. Marines stood already aligned for their drills, the rhythm of their cadence chants rolling across the crisp air. In the center of the open field, a small, focused circle of attention gathered a patch of green where something extraordinary was about to unfold. Sergeant Ethan Ward adjusted the cuff of his uniform and looked down at Echo, the young German shepherd sitting obediently by his boot. The pup had grown rapidly, his legs stretched longer, his coat thicker and darker, now streaked with charcoal ribbons tracing his spine. His amber eyes sparkled with eager curiosity, flicking between the faces of the soldiers who stood watching. Ethan knelt down, locking eyes with the dog. "All right, soldier," he said softly. "Show me what you're made of." Captain Nathan Cole stood a few paces away, clipboard in hand, his calm hazel eyes assessing every move with practiced clarity. The 39-year-old officer was known for his exacting standards. His crisp uniform mirrored his nature-controlled, meticulous, and never one to let emotion dictate his actions. But beneath that composed exterior, Cole held an unspoken respect for Ethan. They had served side by side years ago, and though their paths had since diverged, a silent understanding lingered between them, wordless yet undeniable. "Proceed, Sergeant," Cole called. On the sidelines, Dr. Sarah Kim observed intently, her dark eyes sharp behind the glare of her sunglasses. Clipboard in hand, her hair pulled back tight, she remained focused. Her fatigue jacket pushed up to her elbows. Sarah's calm exterior masked the exhaustion from countless hours spent overseeing the base's working dogs. Naturally a quiet observer, she trusted data over speculation every time. Yet Echo's unusual behavior pulled at her curiosity more than any chart she had meticulously recorded. She'd spent the past week tracking the unique patterns in his vocalizations, the shifts in tone, pauses, and rhythm, and was beginning to believe the pup's sounds held meaning far beyond random noise. Close by, Tom Rodriguez leaned casually against the fence, arms crossed, wearing a look that mixed amusement with skepticism. "If that dog starts singing again, I swear I'm signing up for the choir," he muttered. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a rubber training ball. "All right, Echo," he commanded, "fetch." He sent the ball rolling across the field, glittering under the early morning light. But Echo didn't budge. He remained perfectly still, ears perked, eyes locked on Ethan rather than the ball. Then, without a hint of warning, the dog produced a sound, not a bark or a whimper, but a sequence of rising and falling notes, deliberate and rhythmic, almost like a song. It lasted a full 10 seconds before abruptly cutting off, leaving an eerie silence suspended over the field. Tom straightened up, blinking in disbelief. Did he just sing? A few Marines watching chuckled, exchanging knowing looks. "Guess the ball's not exciting enough," one teased. But Sarah stayed silent, lowering her clipboard as she tilted her head. "Listen closely to the timing," she murmured. "There's a pattern here. 2 short notes, followed by 1 long one. Pause, then it repeats." Captain Cole frowned, jotting down notes. "That's not obedience, Doctor. That's mere coincidence." Sarah's lips curled into a subtle smile. "Maybe so, but it's a very consistent coincidence." Ethan crouched beside Echo. "Echo," he said softly. "You're supposed to move when I say go." The dog cocked his head, then released another sound, a low hum that deepened into a rumble before fading once more. The tone held something that made Ethan freeze in place. It wasn't defiance, it sounded like acknowledgement, almost like understanding. Captain Cole crossed his arms. "Ward, try again. Use standard verbal commands." Ethan nodded. "Sit." Echo sat with perfect posture. "Down." The dog dropped instantly to the ground. "Stay." Echo held still like a statue. Then Ethan tossed the ball once more. Echo's eyes followed it, but his body remained planted, waiting. When Ethan looked back, Echo barked sharply, one short, decisive syllable. It almost sounded like a word. The crowd erupted in laughter. "That's one disciplined recruit," someone shouted. Even Captain Cole's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Looks like your trainee's got a mind of his own," he remarked. Ethan smirked. Or maybe he's just waiting for the right motivation. Reaching into his pocket again, Ethan pulled out a small strip of jerky. "Good boy." Barely had the words left his mouth when Echo let out a stretched, resonant sound, deep vibrating, a gentle but deliberate H. The Marines laughed uproariously. Tom slapped his thigh. He just said Roger that. Even Captain Cole couldn't suppress a quiet chuckle before composing himself. "That'll do, Sergeant. Quite an intriguing display." Ethan scratched behind Echo's ears. "He's not ready for the field yet, sir, but he's learning how to communicate faster than instinct." Cole nodded thoughtfully, writing down another note. "Not every recruit is born a soldier, Ward. Some are born to teach." The test wrapped up, but the story was far from over. As the soldiers filed away, Tom lingered beside Ethan, staying close. Tom squinted into the blazing afternoon sun and asked, "Ever wonder why a dog like that ends up locked away alone in a crate out there?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He tried not to dwell on it, but as he led Echo back toward the kennels, his mind wandered to a haunting mission he could never forget. Years ago, amid the chaos of a nighttime patrol overseas, his partner Valor, a battle-hardened German shepherd, defied an order to hold position. The explosion came before Ethan could warn him again. Valor had shielded his handler, sacrificing his own life. That guilt had lodged in Ethan's heart ever since, a silent burden he carried like a second pulse. Approaching the shed, Echo nipped playfully at his sleeve, persistent and hopeful. Ethan snapped out of his memory and looked down. "You're nothing like him," he murmured. But you carry that same fierce spirit." Sarah came up behind him, her shadow stretching across the dirt. "He's reading you, you know," she said softly. Ethan turned confused. "Reading me?" She gave a slight nod. Dogs sense emotions, breath, tone, posture. But this one's different. He reflects what he feels. "You were lost in a memory just now, weren't you?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded quietly. Sarah smiled gently, choosing not to probe further. He probably sensed it too. That's why he stayed calm during the test. Ethan gazed at Echo again. The pup cocked his head, ears twitching, as if in understanding. "So you're saying," Ethan spoke slowly, "that he listens to feelings instead of commands?" Sarah shrugged faintly. "Maybe he's teaching us a new language altogether." As evening descended, the camp settled into a hushed calm. The last golden rays stretched long across the barracks, bathing everything in a warm, amber glow. Ethan sat outside, the kennel, notebook in hand, while Echo rested beside him, half asleep but alert to every subtle sound. In the dimming light, Ethan wrote, "Obedience isn't always silence. Sometimes understanding speaks louder." Echo gave a soft, steady hum, an odd melodic murmur. Before curling into a tight ball and closing his eyes, Ethan listened to that strange rhythm, that heartbeat of sound, and for a fleeting moment, the memories of war faded away, replaced by something pure and alive. The afternoon sunlight over Camp Pendleton was sharp and golden, slicing through the fading fog surrendered to the Californian sky. Beyond the barracks, a low ridge stretched toward the edge of the desert, where the shooting range was carved into the dry earth. Gunfire echoed rhythmically in waves, sharp bursts followed by silence. Then another volley rolled over the hills like a steady pulse of discipline. Nearby by the storage sheds, Echo lifted his head. The young German shepherd, now bigger and stronger than the week before, perked his ears toward the distant shots. His coat gleamed in rich sable tones, his amber eyes fixed on the invisible rhythm carried by the wind. Then suddenly he began to sing. It started as a low growl that climbed into a half-howl, before fading into a long, drawn-out whine that broke into a series of guttural melodic notes, strange yet purposeful. The Marines nearby froze mid-conversation. "What in the world is that?" one whispered. Echo's voice filled the space between gunshots, answering the rifle's staccato with a rhythm all his own. Part echo, part song. Sergeant Ethan Ward stepped out from the shade, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been fixing the latch on Echo's kennel. His uniform was dust-coated, yet his stance stayed unwavering, every move etched by habit. His sharp gaze softened as he spotted the pup standing proud, his muzzle lifted toward the echo of the firing range. "You hear that, huh?" Ethan whispered. "That's the sound of Marines in action." Echo pivoted, letting out a brief bark before resuming his strange melodic chorus, growls and trills that rose and fell like rolling waves. Ethan folded his arms, a smile tugging at his lips. "Off-key private," he murmured gently. The noise caught the attention of Dr. Sarah Kim, finishing her rounds in the medical tent. Her tall, lean figure moved with purposeful restlessness. Sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back tight. She carried her trusty field recorder, a relic from her research days before joining COR's veterinary division. Sarah's curiosity often led her into the unknown, defying logic. Years ago, the loss of her family's ranch dog in a wildfire had driven her obsession to decode how animals express fear and resilience. She paused a few steps away, shading her eyes against the sun's glare. "He's not howling," she said softly to the quiet air. "He's modulating." Ethan blinked, puzzled. "He's doing what?" "Listen," she said, lifting the recorder. The device clicked, capturing every note. "He's syncing with the rhythm of the gunfire, shifting his pitch between bursts. That's no accident." Nearby, Tom Rodriguez's sleeves rolled and, wrench in hand, wandered over from their motor pool. His calloused hands and permanently furrowed brow suggested a man who'd survived 3 lifetimes of hardship. He leaned against the fence. Doc, if that's no coincidence, he might just be the first dog composer in marine history. Sarah didn't answer, eyes locked on Echo. The spacing in his tones is deliberate. It's emotional mimicry. Tom frowned, confused. English, Doc. She means he's basically singing, Ethan said with a smirk. Sarah remained serious, more like responding with emotion. He's turning sound into feeling. She crouched down, switching off the recorder. I'm sending this footage to the K9 research unit in San Diego. If I'm right, they'll want to study these patterns. Tom whistled low. You think the Pentagon's ready to back a concert not funny? Sarah said, but a flicker of a smile touched her lips. By late afternoon, the story had spread across the base like wildfire. Marines started calling him the singing pup of Pendleton. Every time the range opened, he'd chime in. Never random barks, but those strange, harmonized sounds that stopped even the toughest soldiers in their tracks and made them grin. Some swore it lifted their spirits. Others found it eerie, like the pup was speaking directly to the bullets. Captain Nathan Cole caught wind of the chatter by nightfall. He sat in his office, the setting sun casting a warm glow over a pile of reports on his desk. The room was immaculate, just as disciplined as the man himself. Every object perfectly arranged. Photos of his unit, a coffee mug etched with discipline, and a single file marked Ward Ethan. When Ethan stepped in, Cole didn't look up immediately. I heard your dog's been giving concerts, the captain said finally. Not my dog, Sir Ethan replied without missing a beat. Just the base's loudest recruit. Cole looked up with a chuckle. You know, Ward morale reports show productivity's up this week. Maybe it's time to promote him. Ethan smiled in a rare moment. Sir, he's already outranking me. Cole's grin softened into thoughtful reflection. Hold on to those recordings. If Dr. Kim's theory checks out, Command might greenlight a behavioral study. It could prove invaluable for advancing emotional training with K9 units. Yes, sir, Ethan replied. As the night settled, the camp fell silent once again. The last ember of orange light faded behind the hills, giving way to the silver glow of distant stars. Inside the kennels, Echo lay curled beneath his blanket, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Ethan sat nearby, with his journal in hand, the gentle drone of the generator weaving into the quiet night. He wrote with deliberate care, his words precise and measured. He sings along with the fire's crackle, perhaps because he's never known true peace. A few moments later, Sarah appeared, her tablet casting a soft glow on her face. I sent the recording to San Diego, she reported. Their lab confirmed it patterned rhythm, steady timing. They called it empathic mimicry. Ethan looked up thoughtfully. So he really is sensing the gunfire, not just reacting to danger, but interpreting it, transforming chaos into a steady beat. Tom's voice came from the shadows where he was fixing a light fixture. Sounds like half the Marines I know, turning explosions into routine. Sarah smiled faintly, understanding. Maybe that's why Echo truly belongs here. The dog stirred, releasing a soft hum, followed by a half bark that drifted into a sigh. Ethan reached out, stroking the top of his head. You hear that, buddy? You're a star now. The pup yawned, eyes half-lidded, and let out a low growl that climbed slightly at the end, a sound almost like laughter. Ethan leaned back, his face melting into a gentle smile. For the first time in years, the base didn't feel so empty. Since Valor's passing, he finally allowed himself the warmth of joy without shadows of guilt. Closing his eyes, a flash came to him, his old partner racing beside him through desert heat, barking at the wind. But in that vision, Valor's dark eyes transformed into Echo's amber gaze, shining bright beneath the sun as the pup barked in sync with the distant rumble of rifles. Ethan awoke with a start, heart pounding but grinning. Outside, dawn had yet to break. The world was still pierced only by one familiar sound, a low, contented hum from the kennel. The following week dawned like any other at Camp Pendleton. Early reveille drills echoing over blacktop, the faint scent of gunpowder drifting on the breeze. But beneath the stiff discipline, something gentler lingered laughter. The Marines had grown fond of the strange melody floating from the kennels. Echo, the young German shepherd whose coat shimmered bronze in the sunlight, had unofficially become the base's mascot. Even those indifferent to animals found themselves drawn near to hear his strange voice. That morning, a young private named Ryan Cooper was assigned inventory duties near the kennels. Ryan was barely 20, lean and freckled, carrying the wide-eyed wonder of a man who still saw the world through fresh eyes. His sandy hair poked out from beneath his cap, and his phone was tucked discreetly inside his sleeve, a small act of rebellion in a landscape of strict rules. As he passed the kennel, he saw Sergeant Ethan Ward kneeling beside Echo, teaching the dog hand signals. Ethan pointed at his chest. "Stay," Echo barked once. "Sit." Echo obeyed, tail wagging eagerly. Then when Ethan said speak, the dog let loose a cascade of sounds, soft growls rising into chirps and brief whines, almost as if he was asking a question. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "You're gonna get me kicked out, kid." Ryan couldn't resist. He lifted his phone and hit record. The sunlight framed the moment perfectly, the stoic Marine kneeling before a dog that seemed to talk. Ethan hadn't even noticed. The golden sunlight cast a perfect frame around the moment the resolute Marine kneeling before a dog that spoke. Ethan was completely unaware. By the time he acted, it was already too late. "Cooper, what exactly are you up to?" Ryan shot upright without hesitation. "Sir, just checking the camera focus," he stammered. Ethan sighed deeply. Echo let out 2 sharp barks, almost as if ridiculing the feeble excuse. "See?" Ryan chuckled softly. "Oh, even he's not buying that one." Later that night, as the base lights dimmed and the steady hum of casual chatter faded away, Ryan uploaded the brief clip to his social media captioned, "Simply Marine Puppy, talking back to his sergeant." He expected little more than a handful of likes from friends back home. But by first light, his phone buzzed relentlessly. Within 12 hours, the video soared past 1 million views. Marines from distant bases tagged their comrades. Comments poured in. "Made my whole day. That dog's got more discipline than I ever did. Every base needs a morale boost like this." At the 24-hour mark, the count climbed beyond 2 million. Echo had transformed into an overnight internet legend. Captain Nathan Cole called Ethan into his office. The air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Cole sat behind his desk, the phone alight with a stream of media inquiries. "You know something funny, Ward," he began. "Command poured half a year and a fortune into morale campaigns. Turns out all we needed was your dog." Ethan stood at attention, rigid yet respectful. "Permission to clarify, sir? He's not actually my dog." Cole's smile was dry, but amused. "Tell that to the internet." Soon after, reporters from the Armed Forces Network arrived at the base, escorted by Dr. Sarah Kim. She'd swapped her fatigues for a smart navy blazer, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Media lights danced on her composed features, but her voice carried sincere warmth. Sarah had never enjoyed the camera glare, yet she understood the story's significance. Echo reminds us that compassion and service aren't mutually exclusive, she told an interviewer. He's living proof that healing speaks in more ways than one. Ethan tried to fade into the background, but the cameras found him regardless. Standing beside Echo, who sat faithfully at his side, Ethan looked more like a protective father than just a handler. When asked what made Echo stand out, Ethan paused. "He doesn't just hear you," he finally said. "He understands." Meanwhile, Tom Rodriguez observed the spectacle from a distance, arms folded. 2 million views, he muttered under his breath. "I can't even get a wrench approved without drowning in paperwork for a week." The media storm roared on for days. Messages flooded in, some playful, others deeply sincere. But one particular letter caught Sarah's eye. It came from a young boy in Texas, handwritten and scanned by his mother. One evening, she handed it to Ethan. "You should read this," she whispered gently. Ethan carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unsteady, that tender scrawl of a child still finding confidence. Dear Marine, my dad was a soldier too. He passed away last year. Mom says he used to talk to our dog when he came back from duty. When I saw your video and your puppy made those sounds, it felt like hearing my dad's voice again. Thank you for letting him speak. From Jake, 9 years old, Dallas, Texas. Ethan's hand trembled as he folded the note. Silence enveloped the barracks. Only Echo's steady, soft breaths filled the stillness. Finally, Ethan whispered. He believes his father's voice came through a dog. Sarah's calm voice responded. Maybe it did. Grief finds its own strange messengers. That night, Ethan sat alone at his modest desk, the letter resting beside his notebook. He penned his thoughts slowly, carefully, as always. A voice doesn't need words to be heard. Sometimes it comes from those who've never learned to keep quiet. He believes his father's voice speaks through that dog, Sarah said quietly. And maybe she was right. Grief manifests in the most unexpected messengers. That night, Ethan sat at his modest desk, the letter resting beside his notebook. With deliberate care, he put pen to paper. A voice need not always be spoken. Sometimes it is carried by those who have never learned to hold their silence. He halted, exhaled deeply, and cast his gaze toward Echo, who lay stretched out on the floor, paws twitching as if chasing dreams. Outside, a gentle drizzle began to fall, an unusual surprise for the dry season. The base lay unusually still beneath that soft rain, and Ethan's thoughts drifted back to Valor, the faithful K-9 whose bravery once saved his life at the ultimate cost. He pictured Valor racing through that same field, barking defiantly at thunder, fearless and proud. For once that memory brought no pain. Instead, it offered solace. The next day, a printed headline on the camp's bulletin board declared, "The talking pup of Pendleton inspires millions." Beneath it, a photo showed Ethan kneeling beside Echo, the pup caught mid-bark, both illuminated by a warm shaft of sunlight. The caption read, "A reminder that even amid war, kindness speaks loudest." As Ethan passed, the Marines saluted him with playful grins. "Permission to bark," Sergeant One quipped. He shook his head, masking a smile. "At ease, gentlemen." Sarah appeared, clutching her coffee. "You realize he's more famous than all of us combined." "Let him have the spotlight," Ethan replied. "He's earned every bit of it." Later that night, after the base fell silent, Ethan returned to this kennel. Echo's ears perked up, his tail thudding against the floor. Ethan crouched beside him. "You changed a lot of hearts this week." You know that Echo let out a short bark, followed by a soft hum that almost felt like an answer. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know, but I bet you just wanted dinner." He opened the tin, poured the food into the bowl, and sat quietly as the steady crunching filled the hushed room. Beyond the world's miracles and headlines for Ethan, it was simpler than that. A bond, a shared breath, a steady heartbeat in the quiet. As night deepened, rain drummed softly against the tin roof. Ethan sat on the cold floor beside Echo's kennel, unfolding Jake's letter once more. When he reached the end, he looked up to the dim ceiling light and whispered, "Good boy." Echo lifted his head, let out a gentle whine, and placed his warm, steady paw over Ethan's boot. For a long moment, neither stirred. 6 weeks after the video that warmed Camp Pendleton's heart, the mood shifted. The laughter that once brightened every bark from Echo, the young German shepherd with golden brown fur and striking amber eyes, began to fade. Orders from headquarters had come. Brief and stamped in red, transfer K-9 training facility to Nevada. Sergeant Ethan Ward stood in the operations room, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. His jaw clenched tight. The air smelled of coffee and antiseptic, but beneath it lingered something heavier still, finality. Across from him sat Captain Nathan Cole, posture flawless, expression composed yet unreadable. "You knew this might come," Cole said, in calm tones, his hazel eyes softening just slightly. "Echoes have become too visible. Command wants to evaluate his potential official channel's official training. Ethan folded the paper carefully, as if trying to keep it from ripping apart. With all due respect, sir, that dog isn't built for isolation. He needs connection. Cole leaned back, fingers intertwined. Ward, I've read the reports. Dr. Kim says the same. But you and I both know decisions like this don't get made down here. Ethan fixed his gaze on him for a long beat, then nodded once. Permission to speak openly. Cole let out a quiet sigh. You always do. That dog isn't a weapon, sir. He's a messenger. And if they shut him down, they'll lose everything that made him extraordinary. Cole didn't respond right away. He gazed out the window as the flag fluttered against the wind, then turned back around. File your petition if you want, but orders stand firm until someone changes them. That's all I can offer you. Outside, the day had turned dusky gray. Clouds were rolling in from the Pacific, and the sharp scent of rain hung thickly in the air. Ethan walked toward the kennel's boots, crunching on gravel. Echo perked up the moment he showed, ears pricked, hightail wagging cautiously. When Ethan knelt down, the pup pressed his muzzle against his chest and breathed out a soft sound, a low humming that felt like comfort rather than complaint. Yeah, Ethan whispered. I heard it too. Inside the medic tent, Dr. Sarah Kim paced her lab coat unbuttoned, revealing the olive fatigues underneath. She looked more restless than usual, her sharp eyes clouded by something beyond data. Her tall frame moved with purposeful energy, like someone struggling to stay composed. When Ethan stepped in, she spoke before he could. They can't take him. Ethan exhaled deeply. It's not up to us. I ran the stress tests again this morning, Sarah said, scrolling through her tablet. He flinches at explosions, avoids tight tunnels, and refuses to attack on command. But his cortisol drops sharply when he hears human voices. That's not training for combat. That's pure empathy. Ethan frowned. You think command cares about empathy? No, she said quietly. But I do. Her voice softened. And I believe you do too. They stood in silence. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Later that evening, Tom Rodriguez found Ethan sitting beside Echo's kennel, rain now pounding against the roof. Tom had swapped his greasy coveralls for a wool jacket that smelled faintly of oil and tobacco. His weathered face looked older in the dim light, but his voice remained gentle. They told me he said about Nevada. Ethan didn't look up. He won't make it there. Tom leaned against the wall. Ever notice how the base feels quieter when he's not speaking, like the whole place is holding its breath? Ethan gave a faint chuckle. You're getting poetic on me. Tom! Tom shrugged. Guy spends 2 decades fixing broken engines. He learns what's worth saving. He laid a hand on Ethan's shoulder. He's not just a dog, you know. He's the heart of this place. Maybe the piece of peace none of us realized we needed. Ethan swallowed hard. He felt Echo's steady, trusting gaze on him. They'll take him in 2 days. Then make these 2 days count, Tom said, stepping out into the rain. That night the barracks felt heavier. The storm outside raged louder, the flicker of lightning painting the walls bright white every few seconds. Ethan stayed beside the kennel long after lights were out. Echo lay quietly next to him, head resting on his boot. Every few minutes, the pup let out a long, drawn-out whine that seemed to hum with sorrow. Ethan reached down, rubbing behind Echo's ear. It's okay, boy, he whispered. You don't owe anyone a thing. Echo responded with a low rumble, almost a sigh, nuzzling closer. The steady sound of his breathing filled the small room. Ethan closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty. The next morning, the base buzzed with whispers. Word had spread quietly through the ranks Echo was leaving. Between drills, soldiers stopped by, leaving small tokens beside the kennel. A worn dog tag, a well-chewed ball, a carefully folded note. Even the mess hall cooks made their rounds offering scraps of leftover chicken. Everyone seemed to grasp the weight of the decision, although none dared voice opposition. At noon, Doctor, Kim summoned an emergency meeting in the officers' lounge. Her voice was steady, commanding, but beneath it lay a simmering defiance. Echo isn't fit for combat assignments, she announced, displaying test results on the screen. His empathy levels are through the roof. Loud, sudden noises stir emotional pain, not threaten him. Pushing him through combat training will only scar him and destroy the very thing that makes him extraordinary. Captain Cole rubbed his temples, Doctor. Your data is compelling, but Command sees the bigger picture. The public relations boost this dog provides is undeniable. Sarah folded her arms. You're not sending him into battle. You're isolating him. You'll break his spirit. Silence fell over the room. Cole locked eyes with her, then shifted to Ethan. Sergeant, do you agree with her assessment? Ethan met the stare head on. Yes, sir. Echo's mission was never about fighting. It's about connection. Cole tapped his pen rhythmically on the table for a long moment, then finally said, The transfer will proceed, but Ward, you'll escort him yourself. When the meeting adjourned, Sarah approached Ethan quietly. If you can find any way to delay the transfer even just a few days, do it. Ethan nodded, determined. I'll try. That night he sat beside Echo's kennel once more. The pup was silent, eyes locked on him with unwavering trust. Ethan opened the gate and lowered to one knee, resting a hand gently on the fur. They think you're just a soldier, kid, he said softly. But you're the reason some of us still remember what it means to be human. Echo responded with a faint whine, pressing his forehead against Ethan's chest. When midnight struck, Tom returned, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Couldn't sleep either, he said. He handed Ethan a cup and leaned against the wall, eyes watching rain drip from the ceiling. You're going to fight this, aren't you? Ethan nodded firmly. I won't let them send him somewhere he'll be broken. Tom raised his mug in quiet salute. Then here's to 2 impossible battles. They drank in heavy silence, the patter of rain blending with Echo's slow, steady breaths. By dawn, Ethan had made his decision. He strode into Captain Cole's office, rain clinging to his sleeves, and laid down a single form, an official petition for temporary guardianship of Echo, until a fitting permanent home could be secured. Cole studied it, unreadable. You're taking him under your wing? Yes, sir, until he finds where he belongs. After a long pause, Cole signed. Don't make me regret this, Sergeant. Back at the kennel, Echo barked sharply, short, bright, alive. Ethan knelt, a faint smile crossing his face. You're staying for now, soldier, he said. Echo wagged his tail with fierce joy, releasing a long, humming sound that soared like a melody into the quiet morning air. For the first time in weeks, Ethan laughed. The November dawn dawned soft and pale over Camp Pendleton, draping the barracks in a wash of muted gold. The air carried a faint saltiness from the sea, mingled with the subtle mix of diesel and damp earth that lingered after a gentle night rain. Sergeant Ethan Ward stood outside the administrative office, his uniform jacket zipped tight against the chill. Clutching a thermos filled with steaming black coffee, Ethan moved forward. Echo, trotting faithfully at his side, tail wagging with steady rhythm, his ears alert and keen. The young German shepherd was now nearly fully grown. His glossy coat gleamed his stride confident, and his eyes held a depth of understanding far beyond his years. He had become an enduring symbol across the base, a quiet miracle who had somehow lifted the spirits of the entire garrison. As Ethan stepped into the office, Captain Nathan Cole awaited him behind his desk, a slim envelope resting in his hand. Mail for you, Sergeant? He asked, tapping the envelope gently. Handwritten, that's a rare sight these days. Ethan furrowed his brow in curiosity. Who's it from? Cole shrugged. Postmarked Montana, a woman named Margaret Hale. Ethan took the envelope, feeling the delicate, looping cursive on its surface writing that hinted at an older generation's hand. He broke the seal with care and began to read the words. Dear Sergeant Ward, I am not certain you'll ever see this letter, but I felt compelled to write. My name is Margaret Hale. My husband, Corporal William Hale, served in the Marines for over 22 years. He passed away last winter after a prolonged illness. We lived on a quiet farm outside Bozeman, Montana. It's been so still here lately, too still. Yet recently, I've discovered solace in an unexpected place. A friend shared a video of your dog, Echo, and I've watched it each morning since. There's a spark in his eyes, a certain way he moves. and seems to speak that reminds me of my husband's laughter. For the first time in months, my home feels alive again. I don't know if this is too bold, but I wish to offer Echo a place to call home if he ever needs one. I've built a fenced yard and nailed a wooden sign that reads Echo's Camp. Perhaps he's searching for rest, and maybe so am I. With deepest respect and kindness, Margaret Hale. By the time Ethan finished reading, his throat tightened, emotion thick in his voice. Captain Cole regarded him quietly, his usual stoic demeanor softening momentarily. "Sounds like she means it," Cole observed. Ethan carefully folded the letter, tucking it into his breast pocket. "She sounds like someone who's lonely." Cole nodded in agreement. Most of the people who still write letters these days are. Outside, Echo waited near the doorway, his tail thumping in rhythm as if sensing the subtle shift in the air. Ethan crouched beside his loyal companion. "Montana, huh?" he whispered gently. "Ever seen Snow Kid?" Echo tilted his head thoughtfully, then let out a single confident bark, short and sure, like an answer born from the soul. Later that day, Ethan carried the letter to Dr. Sarah Kim, who sat on the infirmary steps sipping tea from a steel mug. The wind tugged loose strands of her dark hair from the braid. Her eyes, sharp as ever, softened upon seeing the folded letter in his hand. "From command?" she inquired. "No," Ethan replied. "From someone who might change everything." She read silently, her expression shifting from curious to quietly awed. "A widow," she murmured. "She sees herself reflected in him. Or maybe she sees her husband," Ethan suggested quietly. Sarah met his gaze for a moment, thoughtful. Sometimes grief finds its mirror in unexpected places. Maybe they're meant to heal one another. Ethan exhaled deeply. If it brings healing to them both, I'm ready to make the trip myself. Sarah nodded approval, shining in her eyes. Then do it, you both deserve peace. 2 days later, Ethan and Echo settled into a marine transport truck bound northward. The journey stretched over hours and states, California's jagged coastline fading behind them, replaced by sprawling plains beneath an endless sky. Echo rested his head on Ethan's lap, eyes tracing the landscape rolling by. At every stop, strangers recognized him from the viral video. Children would run over to pet him. His eyes traced the world slipping by. At every fuel stop, strangers recognized him from the viral video. Children would eagerly rush forward to pet him, and Echo, ever the gracious companion, would greet them with a gentle bark or a curious whimper. By the time they arrived in Bozeman, Montana twilight had settled in. The sky blazed a fiery orange beyond the mountains, while frost delicately kissed the roadside grass. The directions led them to a humble farmhouse tucked at the end of a worn gravel path. A wooden sign hung at the gate, painstakingly hand-carved, Echo's Camp. Ethan parked the truck and stepped out, the crisp air piercing his lungs, sharp, clean, and invigorating. Echo leapt from the back tail, wagging with joyful energy, nose immediately searching the ground. The farmhouse door creaked open, and Margaret Hale stepped out onto the porch. She was a tall, slender woman in her late 60s, her silver hair neatly swept under a hand-knit shawl. Her face bore the lines of many years, but her clear, steady blue eyes radiated a warm, familiar kindness. Leaning lightly on a carved wooden cane, her posture remained regal, a testament to the strength and resilience only time and trials can forge. "You must be Sergeant Ward," she said, her voice steady, blending strength and gentle warmth born from enduring life's harshest storms. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied, shaking her